Hey! What part of that bill didn't y'all understand? I would say good morning, but it's been a long night. Y'all bow with me. Gracious Heavenly Father, we come again asking you to forgive us, to say thank you for all the blessings. Let us do the right things. Keep us from evil. Keep us from doing harm. Expand our coast and our territory. Bless us and keep us. I ask these things in the name of the Prince of Life. Amen. Okay, the rules. Do not ask for a bill that's already been asked for. I cannot believe there's that many of you that hadn't asked for your bills. I would suggest being quick. Members of the committee, did you get your little pencil? That comes from Justice Brett Grant. I kind of like that pencil. And it does have, you have to sharpen it, I think. Mr. Tanner.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My bill is on the third page of the yellow sheet. It's House Bill 481. It's a drone bill. You remember last year we had a drone legislation the governor vetoed. He appointed a group to study the issue. This bill comes as a result of that, their recommendations. It only deals with preemption and makes sure that the state will be the ones governing drones. ACCG and GMA took no stance as far as in opposition to this bill.
No questions?
Yes, yellow sheet. It's on the yellow sheet, third page. House Bill 481.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Epps.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The committee bring for you today House Bill 472 under modified open rule on the first page. And this bill deals with the concept of truck platooning. It's supported by the Department of Public Safety as well as Georgia Motor Trucking Association. It allows two trucks simply to travel safely, one behind the other, as long as there's a technology on board called a radar-based forward collision avoidance mitigation that can reduce the frequency and severity of rear-end collisions, makes our road, the public, and drivers safer with this technology.
No questions. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Taylor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Page 3, about two-thirds of the way down, House Bill 506. This is a very compact bill, basically asked for by MARTA, changing the MARTA Act, which is about 50 years old, just in a very narrow way and only for concessions as they expand service to allow for like coffee kiosks or newsstands. The previous thing was an invitation to bid, and under the MARTA Act, it was required that they take the highest bidder. What this does is simply changes that from an invitation to bid package to an RFP that allows them to choose by value and you know, best solution, not the highest bidder. Very simple bill, supported by MARTA, supported by all the jurisdictions involved, passed unanimously out of transportation.
Mr. Benton.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Representative over here. Right here.
Gotcha.
when we say concessions, are we talking about food and beverage?
Yes, sir. We're talking about food, beverage, possible newsstands, things like that.
But they won't let you take those on the train.
They will now, if you, under certain circumstances, with sealed plastic containers, such as a water bottle and things like that.
Thank you.
But it just applies to concessions, not anything else. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Caldwell? Wait a sec. Mr. Taylor? Oh, never. Wave 37. Mr. Martin? Mr. Taylor? Mr. Taylor? Everybody's mystery me.
It's like the stair stepper this morning, sir. Thank you.
Mr. Martin?
Chairman Taylor, if you wouldn't mind, on line 44, you've inserted subsection B or subsection M. Subsection M is not in the bill. What is subsection M?
Line 43. Sir, I don't know. Basically, that's because that is the portion that basically says they're required to take the highest bidder under the original MARTA Act.
Have y'all
The higher bid, I should say.
Have you ever heard of a bid where you had to take the highest?
Mr. Chairman, if I might, I think they're talking about the highest return to MARTA, that the vendor has to pay out the highest return to MARTA in this process, not that they pay the highest amount.
The original intent of this was to draw revenue to it, so they were required to take the highest return, correct. This just allows them to take the best solution.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Now, Mr. Harden.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My bill is House Bill 475, fifth from the bottom on the front page. It deals with charitable solicitation and the collection bins used for those. It's the bins current law to give the Secretary of State and local officials a way to basically police and keep these bins available for the charities without some for-profit companies creating problems.
No questions. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Mr. Spencer.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Page 3 under modified open is H.R. 25, just above structured rule. I bring you the annual road naming bill, and I'll stand for any questions, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. All right. We have to get the road naming on, so it'll be on one of the supplementals.
Thank you.
Ms. Gilligan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. I bring to you modified structure, middle of the page, on the third page, HB 496. It's a cleanup bill. There were sections of the code that needed to be cleaned up. Section 1 rather, was pointing to the absolute wrong section. It doesn't even exist anymore, so we had to get to the right section. Section 2 and 3, there was some renaming that was done back in 2011, and these two sections of code were not updated at that time, so it was overlooked.
No questions. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Mr. Dreyer.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Looking at H Bill 453, which is on your front page, a little bit below halfway down, this bill would add the chief magistrate judge for each county to the county law library, which already has a chief state court judge, superior court judge, probate judge, and district attorney. The magistrate judge pay the most in, they should have representation, and they need to be able to gear the library to help pro se parties who don't have a lawyer. This was a need that Chairman Willard identified, and I'm just honored to be a part of the process and would ask for your consideration.
No questions. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Glanton.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, good morning. I bring to you House Bill 485, which is located about 14 on page 3. It's the 14th bill on page 3. And basically, Mr. Chairman, this is a jobs bill, an economic development bill with local control. And it simply is a bill that would allow manufacturers of distilled spirits to operate in an unincorporated portion of a county, and it will remove the stipulation that requires a 35% registered voters petition, as well as it removes the requirement for a referendum election measured by a majority of votes. And the intent of the bill is to allow a company the right to manufacture and distill spirits in a dry county without going through the 35% petition. That's the bill.
Did you get that from Jack Daniels? Lynchburg? Tri-County, y'all. No questions, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Ms. Chandler?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. I bring to you under modified structure rule the first bill, HB 32. This bill provides further protection for our students by strengthening the law regarding sexual offenses in our schools.
No questions, next one.
I have another bill. May I present it too, please? The other one is on the first page, and it's about halfway down, HB 425, which calls for schools allowing young people to take test assessments in pencil and paper format when parents request this. And it also calls for the state superintendent to develop a list of appropriate policies as to what to do with these students when parents refuse the testing.
No questions, thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Efstration.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the Rules Committee. First time asking for HB 497 on the first page, modified open rule toward the bottom of the page, HB 497. This would allow for greater courtroom discretion by judges in both juvenile court and custody disputes. Happy to answer any questions.
Wait, we do have questions. Mr. Setzler.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Could you be a little more descriptive in terms of what kind of discretion it gives and what the effect is?
So first of all, in the juvenile court context, it would allow for informal adjustments, which in adult court are considered pretrial diversion, would allow for a child to complete that program before a petition, or what in adult court we call an indictment or an accusation, would have to be filed. That's the first thing. The second thing is to create something called a de facto custodian, which has been implemented in 11 other states by statute. This allows for a judge only under circumstances in which a finding is made that a parent is unfit, that is, will cause harm to a child, to have discretion to create custody or to order custody of a person who might not fit into our strict family requirements that are existent in the statute. This is somebody with whom the child has resided for an extended period of time and who has extensive contacts with the child, again, only after that unfitness standard is met and determined by the court, which exists under the U.S. Constitution.
Mr. Willard, is that a good fit to the grandparents' bill? No more questions.
Thank you.
Mr. Perkle.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The very first bill on your page, HB 50, is the livestock liability bill. In this bill, a new section was added to Title IV of Chapter 12 of the Georgia Code. It includes livestock activities in the existing statutory framework that extends protections that we already have for horses and llamas, of all things, to also include cattle, sheep, goats, and swine. This bill is modified in the Judiciary Committee to accommodate the concerns of the trial lawyers. They're on board with this. And it's endorsed by the Cattlemen and Farm Bureau, of which make sure you got one of the good steak biscuits this morning from the Cattlemen. This bill will strengthen 4-H and FFA clubs by encouraging more youth participation in shows and teaching events involving livestock. Mr. Chairman, I'll stand for any questions.
No questions. Mr. Holcomb. Holcomb.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. I present to you House Bill 278, which is on the front page under modified open, the 8th line down. What this bill would do is it would allow benefit corporations in the state of Georgia. Benefit corporations is a type of corporate structure that exists in 30 states plus the District of Columbia. Pretty soon it will be in all 50 states. It's an update to the corporate code from the State Bar's corporate section, and it was approved by the Board of Governors. And Chairman Willard asked me to carry the bill because I have some understanding of the subject matter. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
No questions, thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Petrie.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman. I bring you today House Bill 452, modified structure at about 10 down, actually 10 down on page 3. This bill, very simply, will require the Georgia Bureau of Investigation to share information received from the federal government through a program called LENS, to provide that information to our Georgia sheriffs and to the general public on its website. And by the way, Mr. Chairman, just to be clear, this is on criminal aliens who have committed violent crimes, who have been returned to Georgia because their country of origin has refused to take them back. That information is currently provided, and now it is not being disseminated.
Mr. Powell.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Is it not true that the Public Safety Subcommittee and full committee heard this bill, heard from all law enforcement agencies, including the Sheriff's Association, and this is strongly supported as a pro-issue of dissemination of information about these criminal classes?
Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman. This bill is about transparency and public safety. I would also add, was unanimously passed out of committee by all Democrats and Republicans.
I do appreciate the raise in status from Rules Chairman to Speaker, but I will not serve, nor will I seek the office of Speaker. No more questions.
Thank you.
Ms. Nelson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, committee
I don't
members.
know you. Where'd you come from?
I'm a new representative out of Augusta, representing District 125.
Okay. Well, welcome to Rules.
Thank you. House Bill 189, which is on the first page, the 4th item down, the Contract Cancellation Act. This would allow state and local governments to cancel contracts with vendors that do not meet agreed upon terms, including costs. The bill also requires quarterly review of these projects to protect taxpayer investments.
No questions.
Thank you.
Mr. Silcock.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. I present to you this morning House Bill 419, which is under modified structure on the 3rd page, is the 3rd bill down. And I would submit to you first on the description. The description's inaccurate because it says certain counties, and this actually will apply to all counties statewide as presented in the written portion of the bill. This bill would basically allow for all municipalities and counties in our state to regulate the ignition or use of fireworks from 10 a.m. to 12 p.m. Statewide. And this arose out of some concerns in Sandy Springs. Chairman Willard supported me on this bill. Chairman Golick also supported me on this bill. There were some changes made in the subcommittee, but Chairman Welch has assured me that Chairman Mullis is good with the changes and would appreciate your consideration. Are there any questions?
Mr. Golick.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Representative Silcox, this is an important issue. It's important to make sure we have clarity. Of course, when we went ahead and allowed for the legality of fireworks, it doesn't change that. It just allows the local government to implement some common sense measures that they feel they may need to do depending on where they are. Of course, in the densely populated areas or potentially densely populated areas that you and I represent, many others on both sides of the aisle in Metro Atlanta, will allow those officials to use some common sense, especially when you have condominium townhomes and apartments and so forth, and you end up getting into a public safety issue. Isn't that true?
Yes, precisely.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any
No
further
more questions.
Thank you.
Y'all keep using Mr. Willard's name, and it just brings your bill down a little bit. Mr. Hilton.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Willard, and members of the committee.
Did you not hear the part about brings your bill down?
I'm pleased to bring before you House Bill 433 on page 3 under modified structure. House Bill 433. This bill offers critical protections in the landlord-tenant relationships. This bill was brought to us by our chief magistrate judge, sheriffs, and has the support of other large landlords here in Georgia. What the bill does is it offers protections by placing an expiration date on certain writs. We're finding that there's bad actors in the industry that will receive a writ of possession, hold on to that writ, not present it to the sheriff, and then use it as a tool against tenants who have since satisfied their requirements. And so this bill is to help close that loophole, clean it up, and offer protection to tenants across our state.
No questions. Thank you. Ms. Beskin.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. I bring you House Bill 192 on the first page under modified open rule. This is a bill that addresses a standard of care to be followed by bank and corporate officers and directors in their process of making business decisions. It will help banks and other corporations recruit and retain officers and directors.
No questions. Thank you.
Thank you.
Ms. Stovall.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. I am requesting for HB 493, which is on the first page, modified open rule, 4 from the bottom. And what it does, it allows for, if there's any video recording done in any city council meeting, county commission meeting, or school board meeting, that those recordings have to include public comment if public comment is given at the meeting. And it's to be retained for no more than 2 years.
Mr. Fleming.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Representative, if, for example, somebody misused the public comment section and used profanity or said something very inappropriate, would they be able to take that out under your bill and not have to put that out to the public and any kids might watch such things?
I believe they'll be able to use whatever they normally would be able to use for deducting it out, but it's not specified in the bill, if that's the question.
That was my concern. I think the bill says you have to use exactly what was said, and if something inappropriate was said, I'm afraid they couldn't cut that out. Just a thought.
All right.
No more questions. Thank you.
All right. Can I add something to it, Mr. Chairman? Okay, thank you.
I got it.
All right, thank you.
Mr. Golick.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just wanted to put my name beside a few bills. House Bill 137 by Mr. Turner put some common sense restrictions on collection of funds through forfeiture actions and law enforcement. Representative Beskin's House Bill 192 that will prevent any chilling effect from individuals serving as directors of corporations, and Ms. Silcox's House Bill 419 under modified structure, some common sense measures so that if the city of Calhoun wants to go ahead and implement some restrictions on fireworks, they can. Thank you.
Mr. Setzer.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to put my name by H.R. 405, which would provide for the election of State Board of Education by members of this legislature. And, of course, B 390.
Mr. Stevens.
Mr. Chairman, putting my name beside HB 452, the transparency for these violent criminals.
Mr. Benton.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd also like to put my name besides 452.
Mr. Green.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to put my name by House Bill 370 and House Bill 472.
Mr. Williamson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I also would like to put my name by House Bill 192, Representative Beskin's bill.
Ms. Evans.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. I want to present to you House Bill 269. It's on the second page under modified structure. Provides for full tuition HOPE grants for guardsmen and reservists to go to technical college.
Mr. Smyrie.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, House Bill 510 under modified structure rule is repealing a population bill that affects 3 counties dealing with alcoholic beverages.
Ms. Hughley.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to ask for House Bill 474. It would allow for a section in our driver's manual to inform drivers and passengers of the appropriate procedures during a traffic stop. I'd also like to put my name beside House Bill 251, Representative Elam's bill.
Ms. Abrams.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to ask for HB 189, the contract consolation bill on page 1. HB 278, also on page 1, the benefit corporation. HB 453, Representative Dreyer's bill, also under a modified open rule. And I would love to ask for HB 273, which will give us recess.
Mr. Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I put my name beside House Bill 251 and House Bill 405.
Oh, them at 405? Okay, I found it. Mr. Fleming.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to ask the committee to consider 2 measures on page 3 on a modified structure 441, which is an update to our trust law bill to keep us competitive with other states, came unanimously out of Banks and Banking. And my second one is on page 2, Mr. Chairman, on a modified structure 359, a Power of Attorney Act that'll help hopefully allow parents in tough situations to keep their kids out of defects with giving other support units ability to care for them for a short period of time.
Mr. Willard.
Your House Bill 441, is this the same bill that was the last bill 2 years ago on the night of Sinai Die that received 4 positive votes?
It's the one you kicked up a big fuss about, Mr. Chairman. It sure is. But it's not quite the same. We've improved.
Are you hoping to get more votes this time?
I'm hoping you'll help me, Mr. Chairman.
Well, I haven't been asked about that.
I'll come see you.
4? You must have made them mad. Did somebody raise their hand to ask a question? Ms. Dempsey. What number are you?
Right here. Yeah, okay. I had a question about 359. On line 37 and 38, where it says a nonprofit entity in good standing with the Internal Revenue Service for a period not to exceed 1 year. You know, what is considered a could it be like the American Heart Association? Could it be, I mean, what is the relativity to actual child care? Or, I mean, I understand you're talking about a person in good standing is what you're trying to clarify, I guess.
That was to you, Mr. Fleming.
My apologies. I'm sorry. I'm sorry, Madam Chair. Could you ask me again? I was looking at
I'm sorry, because I was just reading it and trying to clarify.
Sure.
So
on
line
359?
Yes,
yes, ma'am.
37 and 38, the line there, a nonprofit entity, like what kind of nonprofit entity?
The attempt there is to get to faith-based organizations. There are quite often churches that will help people, quite often they're church families who have a situation where parents are down and out, rather than having the child go into foster care. That is the attempt to identify faith-based organizations to help these children.
Yeah, and I'd like to take some time, maybe this morning, to try to talk to you about this and clarify, because I'm very concerned on tightening the loophole that we've worked on with foster care or child placement to make sure that there's not any ability for anyone who has the option of a child perpetrator or anyone else that might also belong to a church or a faith-based organization to possibly be given this authority.
I'd be happy to talk to you about
We'll
it.
talk about it.
Thank you, ma'am.
Mr. Caldwell.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I asked for HB 515. It's on the back, last page, number 4. What this bill does, it revises boundaries of certain House districts during the interim term.
I got yours. Mr. Morris. Oh, I'm sorry.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to join Representative Fleming. House Bill 441 is a good bill. We ought not have to go to Tennessee to protect our assets. And I also like Ms. Beskin's bill, House Bill 192. I'll join my friends in asking for that. Thank you.
Mr. J. Powell.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to put my name by HB 251, which is on the middle of the second page under modified structure. And I would also like to put my name on the last page by HB 325 by Chairman Stevens and HB 340 by Representative Blackman.
Mr. Rogers.
Thank you, Chairman. I'd like to put my name by Ms. Dempsey's bill, HB 463, the Early Care and Learning bill, and also by Chairman Powell's bill, HB 350, the Department of Corrections bill.
Mr. A. Powell.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to ask for the first time for HB 350. This is a Department of Corrections bill. The problems that they're encountering with the gang violence and the influence of the gang spreading in our correctional system, they've asked to list tobacco as a item of people trying to smuggle in tobacco, which is traded among inmates. It also, the second part also gives them the authority to basically come down on these inmates that are caught with commissary cards, ID cards, credit cards, any type of these different type of cards, because they're actually holding a lot of the other inmates and their families hostage by blackmail. Second bill, if there's no questions.
We got questions, hold on.
Yes, sir.
Ms. Drenner? The waves. Okay. Second one.
Second bill, House Bill 406. This is a Second Amendment reciprocity bill. We found that we're having problems with one of the states, but we have 12 other states that accept Georgia's licensing for reciprocity. This would clean up that language so that there's no problems with reciprocity of other states accepting Georgia permits.
Anything else?
And one more. House Bill 458 passed the House, passed the Senate committees last year, got held up in the Senate rule. This is the optional bill for local governments that wish to run speed zone cameras in school zones. They can only do that after the zones have been posted, and it's a civil penalty. Call it Saving the Demetrius Bill.
Ms. Cooper.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to put my name by House Bill 161. It's on the second page. It's the needle exchange program. HIV is on the rise in Georgia. We're sort of having a second increase from we lowered our rates and over the years, and now they're rising rapidly. And the state ends up paying a great deal of money because we end up taking care of these indigent HIV patients, and if we can get them clean needles and do anything to reduce the number of HIV cases we have, it will be very beneficial to our bottom line.
Ms. Drenner. Try it again. Try, get it.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. I'd like to also put my name beside HB 161, Representative Price's bill, and HB 438, Representative Gardner's bill.
Did you finish your book? Y'all, Ms. Drenner just finished a book. She's worked extremely hard on it. No, she's writing it. She's not reading it. Come on, Richard. I don't think being in where she is in college, you don't have to read many of them. But I think congratulations are in order. Mr. Harrell.
Mr. Chairman, on structured, back of the fourth page, House Bill 353 brings much needed consumer protections to our title pond industry.
Mr. Powell again.
What kind of protection is in there on the interest rate?
It allows those that choose a fixed term pond and are able to get out without prepayment penalties to effectively reduce the interest rate.
What is the maximum interest rate that's permitted for these?
The maximum law is 25% first 3 months, 12.5% for each additional month.
25% per month for the first 3 months?
That's existing law, yes, sir.
And who regulates this?
In Georgia, the Attorney General's Office of Consumer Protection, and from the federal regulations, they're being impacted by regulations promulgated by the Consumer Finance Protection Board.
Well, under Georgia law, is it, when you say the Attorney General, do I make a complaint to them, or do they actually go in and audit these people, check and see if their processes are correct? They
correct? You would, as a consumer, in fact, the House Bill 353 would require additional disclosure that as a consumer you would call and report any complaints to the Georgia Governor's Office of Consumer Protection attached to the Attorney General's office. That's correct.
Why isn't it regulated like an industrial loan?
Because it's a totally different product.
But it is a loan?
No, sir, it's a pawn.
If it's a fixed amortization, it would be a loan, wouldn't it?
This is a fixed term pawn.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.
I didn't know you become an accountant. I thought you were, yeah, I guess you are with Ways and Means. You're not much of a lawyer. I don't know. I'm gonna see if I can give Mr. Powell some help here. Mr. Golick, a real lawyer.
Mr. Chairman, I think that is drastic overstatement. Just a quick question for the author. I had a bill several years ago having to do with excess proceeds, and my secondhand understanding is that the bill does address that to some degree. Can you speak to that?
It does, and that is an important consumer protection. House Bill 353, under both the existing product as well as the new product, should the borrower default and the vehicle be sold, any excess proceeds from that sale over and above the monies due the title pawn broker must be returned to the borrower. So in law today, there are certain pawn broker transactions where the pawnbroker is keeping additional funds received from the sale after a default. And this would mandate that all those proceeds go back to the borrower, excess proceeds.
No more questions, Mr. Powell. Okay. Anybody else? We're done. Here's the deal. Got one more.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Pursuant to Rule 33.3, I would like to move that we limit time on debate to all items on our rules calendar today to no more than 1 hour per bill. That time shall be designated by our speaker.
All those in favor? All those in favor signify by aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? How many bills we have on the calendar already? 25. Those are the bills that are eligible for the supplemental calendar. That's 50-something. Again, I think the speaker told me yesterday we could not get out of here tomorrow at 6 a.m. We had to get out of here today. The quicker you are, the better off we are. The quicker you are, the more bills we'll get. The slower you are, I promise I'll stop it. I'll see y'all around lunch.